Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday. Matt,
Hey,
hi, I'm Mike Elson, founder of VoiceLessons.com. With me, I have Dr. Matthew Edwards. Matt, thanks for joining with us today.
yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So, welcome. We've got a number of people that came in, and while more people are coming in, we sent out an email. Everyone, we had a form in our application, and we've just upgraded a couple things. So now what we're doing is we're emailing you if you have questions. So you might have got an email from us or saw something on the social media. It's just great to see in less than 12 hours. We just got so many questions that came in. So we picked a number of questions for today's show. These are questions from you, from the audience, asking us questions. You can ask us anything. So if you got that, check your email. And if you're not on the list or you didn't get to ask us your question, go sign up on voicelessons.com and you can drop us your questions. So Matt, this is my favorite time of the week is to do these questions. So I'm going to jump into question number one. This comes from Bernard. Question number one is, what causes the voice to break?
Good. So this is a common question. We could spend an hour talking about all kinds of variations because sometimes breath gets in the way, right? Sometimes breath can help, but pressure changes can actually get in the way. There's something that happens at the vocal fold level, which we'll be talking about tonight, which can definitely get in the way. And then there are things that can happen in the vowel formants and the way that you shape your vowel that can also get in the way and contribute to a break. So let's grab this model over here. We're going to start off with this. This is my larynx model. On the bottom down here is the trachea, and the trachea is what helps bring air into your lungs and, of course, sends air up and out of your lungs. If you're looking at this and you're thinking that's huge, you're right. It's 4.5 times the size of a normal larynx, according to the website. I think it might even be a little bit more than that, but it's definitely bigger than what's in your throat. Right above that trachea is this guy. This is called the cricoid cartilage, and it's shaped like a signet ring. So here's the bottom of the ring, and then you have an expanded part back here in the back. And that'll come into important here in a minute. We're going to go through the cartilages, then we'll hit the muscles. This is the thyroid cartilage, and the thyroid cartilage is shaped like a Roman shield. So it's open in the back, but it's curved in the front. And it has horns that come up and connect it to this, which is called the hyoid bone. And the hyoid bone, you can feel if you run your fingers up, it's the connection point where your larynx is suspended from the base of your tongue. And, we've answered questions before about tongue tension, but, there is literally a connection between your tongue and your larynx, which is why if you're struggling with tongue tension and you feel like you're getting wonky in your pitch or your registration, yes, they are interconnected. And yes, the tongue can cause problems down at the larynx. Now, there are muscles that are really important in the function of the vocal folds when we're singing. And there's actually a muscle that goes right through the folds. So these are the folds here. They start down here at the thyroid cartilage and they insert into these guys. And these are called the arytenoids. And the arytenoids are synovial joints. And a synovial joint in your body is the elbow. You can move your elbow in lots of directions. But this knuckle up here on the front of your finger, you don't move that one in multiple directions. If you do, you're going to urgent care. So it only moves in one direction, not synovial. The other one moves. And so these guys can move open and close, and they can also tilt in a little bit. And as they tilt, it helps bring the vocal folds together. We think it helps maybe regulate thickness as well. Now, the muscle that runs down between that thyroid cartilage down here and the arytenoids is called the thyroarytenoid muscle. And the muscle names inside of the larynx are actually really easy to understand once you get the formula. The first half of the name tells you where the muscle starts. The second part of the name tells you where the muscle inserts. And it always pulls the second point, the insertion point, towards the origination point. So the thyroarytenoid muscle starts at the thyroid cartilage, connects into the arytenoids, and when it contracts, it tries to pull these two closer together. Now, we have to have something that helps elongate the vocal folds. That muscle helps shorten them, but we need something that elongates, and that something is called the cricothyroid muscle. And you can see that there's two parts of that muscle. It starts down here at the cricoid cartilage, hence the first part of the name, and inserts into the thyroid cartilage, which is the second part of the name. And when it contracts, it helps pull this corner of the thyroid cartilage down towards this part of the cricoid cartilage, and we get that tilt. Okay? And you can feel that if you put your fingers right around where your Adam's or Eve's apple is and you go, ah, you should feel that your larynx tilts and it moves up a little bit. That's happening because of the action of your cricothyroid muscle. Now, if we go back here to these arytenoids, The arytenoids, like I said, they're a synovial joint and they can swing together. So we need them to open up when you want to inhale, and we bring them together to swallow, but then of course to speak and to sing as well. And one of the big muscles that does that is this one right here. It's called the inner arytenoid muscle. That inner arytenoid muscle pulls those arytenoids together. On the side, which is kind of hard to see on this model, but it's this muscle that's right here, and it goes down behind this thyroid cartilage. That's called the lateral cricoarytenoid muscle. And so if you connect those names together, crico means it starts at the cricoid cartilage. Arytenoid means it's connecting in here. And when it contracts, it's trying to pull this corner of the arytenoid towards the cricoid cartilage over here. And what that does when it enacts, so that would be breathing in. And when this muscle contracts, it pulls the vocal fold towards the midline. And so you essentially have 4 muscles that are always active when you are bringing your vocal folds together to sing. And that's where we start running into trouble. So think about any sport that you've ever played. You know that, for instance, if you ever played softball or baseball, you first just learned how to hold the bat and how to balance it. Then you had to learn how to swing it and hold it relatively flat. And then eventually you try to get the timing right. There are multiple steps in that whole progress. And each one of those is a motor skill. It's something that your brain has to learn how to do, and it has to coordinate the muscles and send the right signals to the right muscles at the right time to make it all come together, right? It's kind of magical when you really think about it. The voice is the exact same. You inhale and everything opens up. But then you need to bring your vocal folds together to sing. And that happens by those inner arytenoid muscles contracting and those lateral cricoarytenoid muscles contracting. And they have to work together. That takes coordination. Then your brain decides what pitch you're going to sing. And that cricothyroid muscle has to elongate your vocal folds to get you to the place that you can produce that pitch. Now, the thing is that when you start to elongate and you put some tension on that vocal fold, that then can have an impact on the inner arytenoid muscles in the back and the lateral cricoarytenoid muscle. And they are trying to hold on to those folds and help keep them together on that midline. But at some point when you're new to vocal training, new to singing, and you're elongating and elongating, all of a sudden they just kind of give way and you get a big kaboom. And then they come back on the thin upper edge in that breathy light voice with very little closure. And so that's what's causing that break. Now, like I said, there are breath regulation issues and there are resonance issues. So we're looking at this straight as a mechanical, laryngeal, mechanical, biomechanical thing. So when you're trying to go up, there's also a ligament and muscle interaction that happens. There's a ligament that runs alongside that thyroarytenoid muscle. And when you're in the lower part of your range, that thyroarytenoid muscle is engaging. And then as the cricothyroid muscle engages to pull the vocal folds longer, that thyroarytenoid muscle has to start to let go a little bit. But when you're new to singing, it eventually reaches a point where that thyroarytenoid muscle isn't strong enough to hold on, and it gives up tension control and the ligament takes over. And when that happens, we get a break in our voice. That break happens right as it goes boom, and the ligament takes over. And then when we try to come back down, there's a point at which the thyroarytenoid muscle takes back over, and all of a sudden it contracts to help regulate length to keep us on the right pitch. So I know that's all sounds real complicated, and it is. And in all reality, you don't need to know that as a singer. But here's the reason I tell you that. So many singers think that this is a talent issue. Nothing that I just described has anything to do with talent. It has everything to do with motor skill development. And once you understand that about the singing voice, that it's not magic, it's not talent that's making everything happen, it's just a motor skill. You finely tuned your vocal mechanism for a high-end athletic activity. Once you can wrap your mind around that and commit that to memory and start practicing like an athlete, you're going to stop running into those mental roadblocks that say you can't do something, right? So a lot of singers will sing and they've got a break and like, I'm never going to get through this break. I can't do this. And then they'll hear a friend who just goes through the break. They'll be like, God, I wish I was like name person X. And, you know, they've got it all together. They're so perfect. They're so talented. Not necessarily. They're just more tuned. Their motor system is more tuned for the activity they're doing. It could be that they started singing younger than you did. It could be that they grew up in a house where music was around all the time. Their parents just let them sing however they wanted to and never told them to be quiet. Whereas in your house, you weren't allowed to sing loud because somebody worked at home or somebody slept during the day. So you learned to muffle your voice. Well, because they didn't muffle their voice, their motor system was getting tuned all along the way. And because you did have to muffle your voice, your motor system didn't get tuned. Now, the good news is we can make big changes and big progress in motor skills in at like 6 to 8 weeks. right? So if you're really struggling with navigating that break, if you're working and practicing every day, in 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to start to see less of a break. And then if you keep working on it, that gets you to what's called the motor learning phase. And the motor learning phase varies person to person. But that 6 to 8 weeks is what we call the cognitive phase, where you're just learning to do a skill. And after you get through that cognitive phase into the motor learning phase, if you keep practicing every day, you'll start moving through it and getting to the automatic phase. And when you're in the automatic phase, everything just happens. And that's where you want to be. So to answer this question, then we have a question, another one that came in today. We had two about register breaks, and this one will follow up and build off of this one. But for this question, Bernard, what's causing those vocal breaks in your voice is just a lack of coordination and the 4 muscles inside of your larynx. And once you get them coordinated, you're going to start noticing that break will go away. Then as it goes away, you can then start paying attention to what you're doing with your respiratory system. It may be that you're taking too big of a breath. And when you take a huge breath, it's actually putting so much pressure on your vocal folds, they can't make the adjustments they need to. It could be that you're not breathing in enough air, so you don't have enough power to get your vocal folds to move. So you might need to make an adjustment where you're bringing in more air. And then you might be going up and taking the vowel really bright, going, ah, and hitting a ceiling because your larynx is hitting up too high. And if you then just warm up that vowel to ah, you can all of a sudden then start to turn over a little bit and get to the place that you need to be without the break. So that depends on each person's individual anatomy. The anatomy that we're talking about in that instance is the distance between the vocal folds and the opening of the lips. That's the vocal tract. And the vocal tract has multi-dimensions, right? If you look in your mouth, you can see that it's not just a perfect round horn. It's got a lot of dents and creases and crevices. And all of those variations in each person amplify or attenuate, which means cut, different frequencies as they're emitted from the vocal folds. And that's what gives us vowels and timbre. Some people have wider mouths. They're going to have a different timbre than somebody with a narrower mouth. There's even some research showing that the distance between the bottom of your molars and the top of your hard palate and the width between your molars, as well as the width from the back of your front teeth to the back of the molars, all contribute to vocal timbre and actually look like there may be genetics that are at play there based off of your family's background and your ethnic background. So, there are lots of things that contribute to this. And this is where, if these tips alone aren't enough to get you where you need to be, working with a professional coach, getting some guided feedback, taking a group class, taking a course, all those things can help you gain a better understanding of what's going on and help you work through it. But just know you got to explore, you got to experiment, and with time, things will come together.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just added that, Bernard. Matt did a very great breakdown technically, but the simple answer is a muscular imbalance, right? And everybody has those 4 muscles. They're the same for everybody. And if they're not, highly configured, Matt's saying motor skill development, if they're not balanced correctly, one of them is going to give up. And then that's where you get the crack. That's where you get the break, is when it actually says, oh, I can't hold this position anymore. I got to let go. And then you hear, an embarrassing crack. So everybody has to learn how to shift the gears. Some people have better automatic gear shifters. And then other people actually have to go develop how do you go from first gear to second gear and shift through the break. So yeah. I think we hit this one pretty good. Let's jump on to the next one. I think the piggy tails into this question from Nelson. Hey, Nelson, thanks for tuning in. This one, he asked, how can I reduce weight and thickness in my break area without losing cord closure?
So coordinating these 4 muscles, right? So that's why when I saw Nelson had written this question in, I thought this tied in perfect with Bernard. So we talked about the muscles and what's involved. Now what we got to do is start fine tuning them. And so the first thing that I like to do with my students is really introduce the ideas of opposites. We have the thick closure and thin closure. Traditionally, those have been called chest and head. That terminology has existed for centuries. And, in the voice community, there's always debates about terminology and whether we should change it or not. Nobody's going to ever agree. So if we go with the terms chest and head to explain why those are what they are, is if you go, ah, you mainly feel vibrations in your chest. And if you go, ah, you don't feel as much vibration in your chest. And if it's really loud, you tend to hear those vibrations in your head. Now, muscularly, your head has nothing to do with it, and your chest has nothing to do with it. It all has to do with those four intrinsic muscles we just talked about when going through the larynx. So the first thing we want to do is make sure your vocal folds are capable of closing, and that's the thickness that Nelson is talking about. So we just want to get down into that real kind of heavy quality and just on a sustained pitch to start. Ah. Because what that is doing is it is contracting this muscle, the thyroarytenoid muscle, and this muscle on the side, the lateral cricoarytenoid muscle. And it's getting them to hold in place, which is kind of like one of those isometric exercises, like planks, where you just hold it, and that plank is enough to get the muscles to strengthen a bit. When you do that sustained pitch, you're coordinating these two muscles, teaching them that they work together, and teaching them to hold into a nice closed position with your vocal folds to get that buzzy quality. You can start on sustained pitches and then start to move it a little. Ah, or ah. Now, singers of all genders can do this. If you were assigned male at birth or you have testosterone dominant vocal folds, it's going to be that C below, middle C. That's where that's going to kick in. If you were assigned female at birth and you have estrogen dominant vocal folds, you're going to usually find that chest at A below middle C. Now, if you're at any point in transitioning and you're on hormone replacement therapy, you're always going to go with the predominant hormone that's impacting your vocal folds. You could also be a cisgender male or female and have hormone shifts that happen because of medical conditions. So that's why I like to talk about the hormones that are impacting the vocal folds, because at the end of the day, that's really the thing we got to pay attention to. Testosterone really brings in this bottom end and makes it really strong and heavy. And if you don't have a lot of testosterone, you're not going to get that kind of thickness. You'll have more high notes on the other side. Okay? There's anatomical differences as well. And we'll focus on the hormones with this. So after you've gotten a nice chesty sound cranking along, we then want to do the lighter closure that Nelson's probably experiencing his voice flip over into. And that is head voice. And in this terminology that we're using here, head voice equates that breathy, light closure, thin vocal folds. In operatic singing, head voice has a different meaning. Again, terminology can really add some challenges to the mix. But really what we're looking for is not what we call it, but does your body make that sound? There are lots of great ways to get people to sing well. I see a good friend on here tonight, Mary Saunders Barton, who is an amazing voice teacher. She does things a little bit better. Well, yeah, she does things better than me too, but she does things a little bit different than me as well. And she might say things slightly different, but she's still going at this same idea, right? So we may use different terms, but we're still trying to get the instrument to be balanced, trying to make sure that you have light qualities and heavy qualities in all of this. And so when you're up in that light mechanism, we're just trying to make sure that your vocal folds understand that, yes, they close together firmly, but they can also function when they're not as firmly closed together. We need to have both opposites. So in this quality, we're just using like an ooh or an oh. It's going to sound like this in my voice. Right? We could go to an ah and make it even breathier. You see, we're just trying to keep it as light as possible. I've taught like 7 hours today, so mine doesn't want to go very light after 7 hours of talking. But, when you get that light closure, your brain is realizing, oh, I don't only have to shove things tight together. I can lighten them up too. And that primes you to deal with the middle. In the middle, before we even start to really hit it, we want to start teaching our body that it can shift between that heavy quality and that light quality. And the way I like to do that is with what we call messa di voce exercises. And on these, you're going to start, for instance, breathy. You're going to go to that full sound, what we're calling chesty. And then you're going to go back to breathy, what we've been calling heady. Sounds like this. Let's take a better breath to do that. So those muscles, that inner arytenoid and that lateral cricoarytenoid are learning to pull together, learning to open apart. Pull together, and then relax a little bit. You're going to want to do that in the comfortable lower part of your range. So you just start tuning up your body to realize it can regulate the amount of thickness of the vocal folds and alternate between those different sounds. When you've started to master that, then we want to deal where the break is happening. Regardless of your gender, everyone has the same breaking point. It's the E and F above middle C. All right? Everyone's voice tries to break at that point in time. If you carry up chest register above that break, you start then getting up into a full voice as an operatic singer. If you are a bass, a baritone, or a tenor, that gets up into those heroic high notes that have a lot of inside of them, depending on what resonance strategy you choose. And usually if you're a soprano or a mezzo and you're carrying chest up above that, we would say that you're belting. Now, if you didn't catch the talk last week, Maddie Tarbox, who is an amazing voice teacher, talked a lot about belting last week. So go check out that archive on the Facebook page or on our YouTube page if you want to learn more about the implications for belting. But just know that everybody, regardless of your gender, is dealing with that E and F place. So what we want to do is start approaching it. I'm going to do it on a G to D. And we're going to want to start off thick and then try to thin out as we go up to the D. It's going to be like this. So I'm thinning out. Now, it's not always going to be that smooth. When you first do this, it's probably going to break on you. It's going to do something like this. You have to remember, that's not talent. You're not doing anything wrong. It's a motor skill, and the muscles inside your larynx just don't know what to do. So you're going to slow down and take your time to live in that instability. You got to embrace the crack. This kind of crack, not whack, okay? This kind of crack is good because it means that you're not squeezing with your throat muscles, right? Surrounding your throat, we have all kinds of muscles on the outside. Look, they're all around here, okay? They interfere. They get in the way. They cause us problems. If you squeeze them tight enough, you can prevent your voice from cracking, but you're not going to have the high notes that you want. If you relax those muscles, you might find that you crack more, but instead your body's going to start having to figure out how to do things at the laryngeal level. And that's the key to long-term success. Then as you get up into higher parts of your range, you're going to still be thinning out. So I'm going to jump up to an F. It's teaching me how to thin out right across that break. We can even go up to the G. And you can hear the lack of practice on that and the fatigue from today. But if I actually practiced it every day, that would smooth out and those little teeny blips would go away. Now, when you've really figured that out, you can glide up into that thin spot and then crescendo into a fuller sound. So, for instance, I could do this. So I use the thinness to get across the break. And then I start to bring the vocal folds together by thinking of bringing in more of that chest quality. I learned how to do that with those single pitches. And then I can find the max amount of closure that my voice can handle on any given pitch. That's more of like a belt quality that I just did. If you round your vowel, it'll take you more into your classical quality. Still going up, lightening up, but we're using a rounder vowel, which gives us that more operatic tone, and then crescendoing through that. Now, sometimes you're going to get stuck, and no matter what you do, you're just going to keep hitting a brick wall. When that happens, I want you to jump up to head voice and bring head down, because a lot of times your brain is struggling to remember what it feels like to lighten up around those pitches, the pitches where your voice wants to break. So you're just going to slowly go down in that head register. You're going to take it as low as it goes. So like this. Go all the way down and then take it up. Again, we're just teaching our body not to freak out when we hit those pitches. That, hey, I got options. We're going to keep exploring those options. Then start to bring a little bit more chest in. Ooh, taking that up. Ooh. You're not going to hit the full sound right away. You're going to let it do what it does. If you feel stuck, do some fifth glides. If you feel really stuck, bring your head register down. Then try bringing it back up again. If you keep just weaving through the middle, doing those glides to lighten up from chest into a head of your production and then back into chest, bringing head voice down. You can even increase head as you bring it down. And start tuning that way as well. Now, if you notice, I don't care how I sound when I'm doing this, because this isn't a performance sound.
These are exercise sounds.
Exercise sounds. It's like going to the gym. When I go bench press at the gym, I could care less how I look. I just don't want the bar to collapse on my chest, and I want it to actually be enough weight so that I can maybe one day get the pecs of my dreams. All right, not going to happen right now, but when I was able to work out all the time pre-kids, that's what we were trying to do, right? Didn't care what it looked like. When people go to exercise their voice, so many times they worry about what it sounds like. And they block themselves from reaching the progress that they so desire to get, okay? Sometimes we got to go through an ugly duckling phase. And if you're going through that ugly duckling phase, you need to remember you are in the process of coordinating your motor system. And right now, we are coordinating the motor system by focusing on one part of your instrument, the larynx. Now, you have multiple parts of your instrument. You have the structure of your instrument, which is posture. If your posture is out of whack, that could get in the way of you ironing out your registration. So you want to make sure that your head is balanced on your spine. Your spine actually connects that to your skull in between your ears. It's called the AO joint. It goes right in there. The ears will be right there. So if you put your fingers looking at your ears right there, that's where the spine is. Here's another model you can look at. So ears right there. Fingers would be like that. And if we look on the inside, that's the point right there. That's the cervical vertebrae, and that's where they connect to the skull. So you do want to make sure that's in a good place of alignment. Not only do we have the structure to worry about, we also have the respiratory system. So it could be the things you're doing with your respiratory system need to be tweaked or tuned in order to get the sound that you're really looking for. Then you also have to deal with resonance. So we have everything behind the hump of the tongue, what we could call the back room, and changes in the back room affect timbre. And then you have everything that happens in the front room, everything in front of the hump of the tongue, which is primarily responsible for changes in vowel quality and also can affect timbre and tone as well. And then you're also dealing with all of that in terms of articulation. So we have lots of components of the instrument, and that doesn't even touch on storytelling, right? One of my favorite quotes is a quote by an acting teacher named Stanislavski. He was first a singer who then invented the basis of everything that all actors are taught today. And he says, vocal sound producing machines are of no use to society or culture. We want living people singing artists. And if you really get to the core of that, he makes a really good point. If we're just focusing on stage in a performance setting of just making the right sounds, then we're just like a machine. You might as well go listen to a computer sing. What people want is to connect with the person they're listening to, right? We sing to communicate the human experience through song. And sometimes we're singing that song to help other people know they're not alone. Hey, I've been through a breakup before. I got through it. And we sing a song or write a song as a release, knowing other people will identify with it and maybe find some closure. Maybe we write a love song, about our significant other. And we write it for them, but then we also share it with others because we know that not everybody in the world sings, not everybody writes songs, but that song might bring people together, right? And you see this all the time at weddings. People get up and they dance to a song on their wedding that's something special and meaningful to them, right? Sometimes you just want to get up and perform to help people forget about all their troubles and dance the night away. That's its own purpose. If you're going to a dance club and you're hearing a band playing, you don't want to listen to the singer just making sounds. You want to listen to them telling a story. So when you're listening to yourself making these exercise sounds like the ones I just made and you're going, man, I don't know that I love that sound. It's okay because you're not telling a story. And our brains know what vocal sound should accompany storytelling. There's a lot of research on this. Researchers all over the world are discovering that pretty much all human beings, it's like 98% of humans, will all identify the same vocal qualities with certain emotional states of being. So when you're in this exercise and conditioning mode, you're not paying any attention to any of that information. So it's not going to give you the result that you're looking for. But the key is with the motor system is if you get into that automatic stage, you don't have to think this much anymore. So eventually everything we've talked about here for the last, half hour, you're never going to think about again. You're just going to get on stage and be like, hey, I want my voice to be edgy and powerful. Amazing grace. Or you're going to say, you know what? I need this to sound really comforting. Amazing grace. And your brain will just know how to respond because you've done so much conditioning that you've gotten your voice to that automatic phase. And the storyteller is now leading the way. So do not fear the ugly duckling phase. Realize that this answer tonight is just one component of the whole instrument, and it's just addressing one specific question. If you're making these sounds and you're not thrilled with the way they're going, give yourself time, 6 to 8 weeks before you start really feeling like you're getting a handle on it and understanding it. If you reach that 6 to 8 week point and you just still feel lost and hopeless and you think it can't be done, have no fear, it can. You just need a little bit of help. You need a coach. You need a voice teacher, because coaches and voice teachers do this all day, every day, for years and years and years. And while it may seem expensive to buy a lesson, right? You may see that the price is $40, $50, $60, $80 for that hour. And you're looking, why would I pay $80 for an hour with somebody one-on-one? You're not paying $80 for that hour. You're paying $80 for the 20 years of studying that teacher has done to get to the point that in 1 hour, they can help fix your registration breaks. Because a really good teacher who really understands vocal function in 1 hour can show you a lot. So you have to remember, you're paying for their experience, for their years of study, all the conferences that they've attended, all the books that they've bought, all the lessons they've taken themselves, all the observations that they've done to develop the skill set necessary to help you get through those breaks and fix the issues with your voice. And depending on what style you sing, your timeline could be very different. I have rock singers that come to me, and in 3 months, they're feeling great about what they're doing. And that's the end of their studying with me. Then you have musical theater performers who will stay for you in their entire career, or opera singers who will stay with a teacher their entire career. You have some people who feel like they have one particular spot of their voice that's really bothersome. They'll come and check in with me for 1 or 2 sessions. We'll get that taken care of. And they're like, hey, I really appreciate all of your help. I think I'm good now. And great. If they feel good about themselves, that's awesome. So don't let any time commitments or prices scare you if you're really struggling and you really want to get the breakthroughs that you're dreaming of, because a coach really can help, and they can take this information, apply it to you, and save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache along the way.
Awesome. That was a great answer. Let's jump on into our next one because we've got 5 more to get done. Okay, good. And if we don't get to answer a question today, guys, we had so many questions come in the last day, so we'll just keep adding them in. This one comes in from F. Roy. Thanks for writing in. I think this is the teacher that wrote in, and they ask, how does one help a student who has a hard time matching pitch?
Good. So first of all, what I would do is make sure they can do all the exercises that we just did. Because sometimes the pitch matching is that they have so little coordination of those laryngeal muscles that the body it's got nothing to work with, right? You'll really see this a lot of times in somebody who's soft-spoken, and with them being soft-spoken, maybe introverted as well, they don't talk with a lot of inflection. Mike and I are a bit extroverted, so we're like, hey, how's it going? Our voice is moving up and down all day. So that means our laryngeal muscles are getting a workout. But then you have students who come, and this is more of how they talk all day. And they're like, yeah, I really want to sing. I really feel like this is important to me. But you notice as they're talking that their voice isn't modulating a whole lot. Well, what that tells you is those muscles are really underdeveloped because in their regular everyday speech, they're not using them. So instead of doing those registration exercises, focusing on specific pitches, you're just going to do them a cappella, imitating back and forth, saying, I want you to make a strong sound and go, ah, 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 and see what they give you. If they're real quiet and real introverted, they might give you, ah, ah, ah. So you're going to have to work with that. Some of the things that can help is, Mary Saunders, I mentioned, is here. Mary Saunders Barton is here. She talks a lot about calling. She'll say, "Hey, taxi," or "Hey, mom," and ask them to, imagine a situation where they're calling to somebody across the field, across the street. That can be really good tactic to get them to engage in more full vocal closure, because most people have yelled at some point in their life, no matter how introverted they are. So if you get them to do that, say that's vocal closure. When you say, "Hey," that's closing your vocal folds. In the bottom of your range, go, "Hey," and close your vocal folds, and get them doing that. Then introduce them to that opposite breathy sound by just having them go, "Woo, woo, 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 woo," or "ha, ha, 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 ha," just getting them to make those sounds. You would also want to make sure that their posture is lined up. That can be some of the time in your lesson. Make sure that they're coordinating the respiratory system so that when they breathe in, their rib cage expands, their abdominal wall relaxes so that the diaphragm can descend. And that when they exhale, they don't collapse everything in, but they slowly let everything come back in. Right? So it's going to be good exercises for them as well. And then get them some tongue drills in case tongue tension or jaw tension is getting in the way. So getting them to do a la 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 la. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Right? Just doing things to make sure that their body's moving. You're helping break up their system a little bit. After you've gotten them comfortable with those parts of doing things, you're going to want to then start trying to find the pitches of the sounds they make. So you're not playing the pitch. You're asking them to make a sound, and then you're finding the pitch on the piano. So you say, "I want you to give me something real low and chesty, like an ah." Give me So I'd say, "That sounds about there." Do "ah" again, and they do "ah, ah." We'll go, "Cool." So that matches up with this on the piano. So when I play this, can you do that too? I'll go Good. Now sometimes they're going to struggle with that, and so you say, "I want you to see if you can't glide down and find it." Yeah. If they go too far down, then you say, "Let's go from the bottom up." Good. And so one of the things you want to do that can help is help them learn to listen for how the sound waves are coming together. We know if we play dissonant tones together, we hear like competing sound waves. You hear those things wobbling, like, that's off. But when they come together, you only hear one set, right? So you all of a sudden feel like things lock. One tactic I'll use is to grab my guitars, detune the guitar a little bit, and then pluck both the strings and then slowly bring it into tune so they can really hear that wave action happen until the pitch is locked together. So you're trying to teach them how to listen to how their sound waves lock in with the instrument they're trying to match. Now, sometimes the timbre of the piano is going to really throw them off, and they don't know what to do with that. And so, especially now that we're all in the digital age, we can take advantage of our digital pianos. So I'll sometimes bring in a reed instrument and say, "Well, down there, it's kind of like a saxophone. So give me a saxophone quality." Right, going, "Ah." And if we want them to get even more chest voice into that, I'll say, "Well, let's do more of a brass quality." And I'll pull up like a tuba. And get them to feel those vocal qualities. A lot of times if we mix the timbre up of the instrument they're trying to match, it'll really help, because not everybody's grown up hearing a piano. And then when they're in their head voice, when they're struggling up there, I like to pop them over to a flute. So then when you're saying find that hooty sound like a flute has a lot of air that escapes. So it helps them kind of match up that head tone. And we can switch back and forth between the instruments as they're starting to get it. And then when we get them onto the right pitch, we then start down here and start bringing the piano back into the mix. Or we then eventually want to bring in chords. So then we hold on to the chord and say, "Can you find where you belong in the chord?" And even if they come in at or you're winning, because they're starting to hear where they fit in the big picture. That's the next. Then, of course, after we've done first single pitches, we're wanting to try to bring them up into the upper part of their range and doing small exercises. It may just have to be seconds at first. Yeah. Again, they're just coordinating that motor system. That cricothyroid muscle is trying to learn, how much do I move?
And would you do any of that in just pure falsetto alone, just to strengthen just the cricothyroid?
Yeah, exactly, right? You're trying to do it in all parts of their range. You bring up a good point, is we do want to be stretching those muscles as well. So yeah, you definitely, that's what I was saying at the beginning, like just getting them to go, woo, 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 even if they're not on an exact pitch, is still stretching that vocal ligament, stretching the thyroarytenoid muscle, and engaging the cricothyroid muscle. And those are all good things. So, doing that work and making sure you're developing both registers. And then also tell them about the motor learning process. You want to tell them that there are 3 stages to learning. The cognitive phase, which is the phase they're in at that moment. In the cognitive phase, they don't really understand what they're supposed to do, how to do it, and they need you to literally hold their hand and guide them along the way. And every skill is like that. That's how we learned to walk. Somebody held our hands and just made us walk. And then eventually they started to let go of one hand, and then we wobbled along, and then they take one hand away and we tumble a little bit. But after a while, they took that hand away, and the kid starts to just walk on their own. Well, that's because the kid's developing their motor skills. Okay. So just like we learned how to walk, we can learn to sing on pitch. You just got to go through the wobbly phase. And that wobbly phase is the cognitive phase. And as I mentioned before, usually in 6 to 8 weeks, we start seeing some significant progress. People are starting to catch up with it, right? Again, if somebody's real introverted, real quiet in everyday life, it may take more than 6 to 8 weeks because there are lifestyle things that are impacting what's going on. But then that will start to move them into the motor learning phase. You want them to understand that in the motor learning phase, they're going to start needing less feedback from you to get the result. And I like to point that out. So let's say on lesson number 3, I say, hey, let's see where we are today. Can you hit this pitch? And they go, and you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. And they're just like, yeah, I sang on pitch. What's so amazing about that? And then I like to explain to them, what's amazing about that is you just did that without me doing anything else for you. That means you've entered the motor learning phase. All right, let's do it again. See? And then you'll hit another pitch and you'll go, and you'll be like, you're just a little off. And they'll be like, darn it. But be like, look, that's the transition to the motor learning phase. I help you a little bit. I don't have to show you the entire thing. I tweak. That still is an indication that you're in the motor learning phase. I'm just going to give you a little tweak. Then you explain to them that the goal is I'll give less and less and less tweaks until finally I don't tweak at all. And that means they've reached automaticity, that they now just know what to do and they're getting on to pitch. And then explain to them, once you reach that, we're going to go back to the cognitive phase in a new part of your technique. And then we'll start to teach you about registration or teach you about vowels, or we'll teach you how to blend your registers, whatever you decide is the next best step for them. But break it down and say, now we're in this cognitive phase, let's work through it. What I've found time and time again is that when you really help students understand that their issues have nothing to do with talent and everything to do with a lack of agility, a lack of practice, a lack of the motor skills, it takes so much pressure off of them. Because then they realize, oh, I've learned other things before. Well, clearly I can learn this. And you can point it out. Writing in school was a motor skill. You learned how to do it. At some point in time, walking's a motor skill. You learned how to do it. Any sport that they've played was a motor skill. They learned how to do it. They can learn how to do this too. And the best part is when you get a success story. It was about maybe 7 years ago, I got an email and opened up the email and let's call him John. John said, I don't know if you remember me, but I was what you said was your first student ever when you were a grad student. And he was like my first, official student, somebody beyond just helping. And he said, and I was tone deaf back then, or at least I thought I was. And I was like, yeah, I remember that. He's like, I now lead a praise and worship band. And I'm constantly singing and leading the band all the time. And I just wanted to thank you for not giving up on me. And you know what? That's the payoff of all of this. It may seem real hard at the beginning. The student might feel hopeless. You might feel hopeless a little bit along the way. But I'm telling you, they can get to the other side. And that's still one of the my most favorite emails I've ever received of a student's success. That's
a great story.
To doing that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, F. Roy, hopefully that helps you. Let's jump into our next one. This is a beginner question here. So Ruchira writes in, how to practice singing at home for beginners. So what do you have? I know, we get all kinds of singers, but the vast majority, as all teachers and everyone know, is the big market on the internet for coming to voicelessons.com is beginner singers, right? So you're out there, you're studying us, you're checking out the lives. What do you have for someone just to get started? How do you get them moving?
Yeah, good. So Ruchira, what I'm saying is to first just start trying to get your voice to just move in different ways. All right. So take a simple song that you know and sing it and make it sound dark. So doing Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Then do it really bright. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. And then find something in the middle. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Then change pitch range and try to do the same thing. Amazing grace, amazing grace, amazing grace. And just start playing around in all different parts of your range. Then trying to do the same phrase loud and soft. Amazing grace, amazing grace. Try keeping your mouth relatively closed. Amazing grace, or really open. Amazing grace. Make your voice really nasally. Amazing grace. Make your voice really hooty. Amazing grace. What you're doing with these exercises is getting your larynx to bounce around, getting your vocal tract to bounce around, and starting to just playfully explore the sounds you are capable of. Now, another thing that you can do is listen to songs that you like and try to imitate those singers. I would stick, though, to singers who aren't hitting the extremes right away, right? So if you're still new to singing, don't go try to pick up Whitney Houston. If you try to go up and start singing Whitney Houston, that could be a big fail, and then you're going to be real frustrated. We don't want you going and trying to go to the top. But picking up Billie Eilish and going for When the Party's Over, most people should be able to sing that. Or listen to somebody like Bob Dylan and pick up The Times They Are Changing. Most people should be able to do that, right? Or pick up the song Hallelujah. You can find it online, accompaniment tracks in any key, right? And listen to a bunch of different singers and imitate the sounds that they're making. And as you're imitating the sounds, try to think to yourself, what is happening? What do I feel? What am I aware of? And start categorizing and labeling things for yourself. Make sure that you're exercising all of those different qualities so you don't get stuck in one singular quality, okay? Then you want to make sure that you're singing enough to get some benefit from it. So in general, when you're first starting, 15, 20 minutes of singing a day is good enough to get your body moving and start tuning it up. After a while, you're going to start feeling like 20 minutes is nothing, and you can easily go up to 30 minutes. Great. Then you'll start to progress slowly. The key is to never go further than you're able to do. After a good practice session, you might feel like, I've used my voice today. It should be a mild fatigue, like you just talked a little bit more than normal, and you're like, I'm a little tired. Just like if you went on a little bit longer walk than normal, and you're like, that was a lot. You shouldn't feel like you just went from a couch to a 5K. If you feel vocally like you just ran a 5K, you went too far. Now, going too far once is probably not actually going to cause much problem, right? You'll be hoarse the next day. You'll probably freak out and think, oh my gosh, I damaged my voice. I did something terrible. You probably didn't. It's possible, but not likely. So what I would say is take a day or two off. You should notice that in 2 or 3 days, your voice starts feeling back to normal. If 2 weeks go by and you're still going, yeah, my voice isn't the same after I did that long practice session, and I was trying to sing that Whitney Houston song, and it's been 2 weeks, then you do want to seek out a laryngologist. Board-certified laryngologists are medical doctors who specialize in treating the larynx. They'll either use a little mirror or a little camera to take a look at your vocal folds and make sure nothing happened. There are injuries like a vocal hemorrhage, which is where you burst a blood vessel on your vocal fold, that can happen from you clearing your throat. So it could be that you think it was the singing and you had a coughing attack, you choked on a piece of food, and you hemorrhaged from choking. So if that's the case, they'll help you through it. And it's totally treatable. It's really not a big deal. You just need to know that it exists and get some help with how to treat it. So, rest up if you feel like you went too far. Otherwise, just keep a track on like a journal of, today I was able to sing 15 minutes. Today it was 17 before I started feeling like I was a little fatigued. And do that. Don't ever try to sing at 100% on your own. We rarely ever sing at 100%. We pretty much always are bouncing around 80% to 90% at our loudest. When you try to do 100%, you feel like you're making a noise, but you're pushing your vocal folds so firmly together, they actually start to lose some of the high frequencies. And when you lose those high frequencies, the voice starts to sound more strident and dull. So you actually, by trying to hit 100%, you're making it worse, not better. Whereas if you relax back to 90, 80% of your effort, those vocal folds get their full wave and they're producing all the harmonics that make your voice ring. That's the sweet spot. So don't ever feel like you go to your extremes. All right. After you've done a lot of experimentation like this, you may find that you're getting everything you need on your own. That's great, right? Go back and watch our archives of videos, see what other things that you can pick up. But if you start running into roadblocks, like we mentioned in a couple of the other questions, that's when you might want to reach out to a coach, join a group class, take an online course to fill in your knowledge gaps. Because a lot of times it's those knowledge gaps that are the barriers to you taking your voice and your singing to the next level. And if you do that work, though, you should be able then to start accelerating your progress. And then again, there's certain singers like musical theater performers and opera singers whose schedules are so demanding, they take voice lessons for their entire career. But the average, a singer who's not in one of those categories, they take lessons when they need them. And then when they're happy with where they are, everything feels comfortable, they take a break, they go gig for a while, and then they decide, oh, I want to make a new sound with my voice. So they go and seek out a coach to start learning how to warm up their voice a little bit, or how to add that extra note, or they notice this note's not as easy as it used to be. They go for some sessions, they get what they need, they thank the teacher, and then they go back to doing their thing. So it's normal to come in and out of training as you need it. But, experimentation, you can't go wrong. You're going to learn things about your voice as long as you don't push it too high, too loud, for too long.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the keys are, for me, a safe place at home that you feel comfortable experimenting. So if you live in everyone's kind of still stuck at home right now, try and find a place where you can be alone so you can experiment, so you're not worried about your family or your siblings and stuff listening to you. Warm up your voice. So I don't know if we have time to get into that, but we have that on another video, some warm-ups to do. And just make sure you're having fun. And so that's where I would go with that.
And look, joining a choir is another way to learn a lot. If you're short on money and you're wanting to get some experience and learn something more, look and see if there's a community choir that you can join. It may not be the kind of music you like to sing, but it's going to introduce you to other people that you don't know. You're going to be singing every time you get together for choir rehearsal, and you're going to learn something. Especially
as COVID gets over. I know the choir directors out there can't wait to get back into rehearsals. Absolutely. So I'm sure you can find some choirs to join. So let's jump into next one by Steve. He asks, does vibrato take long to develop, or does it come naturally?
Good. So it varies person to person, Steve. And this is a question we get a lot. There's more and more research becoming available. And actually, I wanted to grab, I don't think I have it, but it's a book. The authors are Davids, Davids, and Latour, Latour. They've got a great book. It's about for choral and solo singing. And they've got the best chapter on vibrato that I've seen in a very long time. And it's real recent. The book was just published last year. So it's got, current research. We believe at this point that vibrato is caused by nerve impulses. I don't know if you're familiar with electric current in DC versus AC. In DC current, which is what batteries run off of, it sends one straight line of electricity. In AC current, it's like a rapid pulse. So what we're learning is that the nervous system sends out signals in rapid pulses that happen to then make the muscles quiver at about 5 to 8 times a second. If you clench your arm real tight like that, you'll start to feel what I'm talking about.
So what we're actually hearing when we hear vibrato is the pitch is moving like a little bit, right? So we're actually hearing like a pitch, like it's oscillating right around the main fundamental.
It is. And so, but what's happening is that what's causing that is those muscle contractions. And it's muscle contractions of those muscles we talked about at the top of the show, the cricothyroid muscle and the thyroarytenoid muscle. They're working to sustain a pitch, right? So the thyroarytenoid is contracting a certain amount. The cricothyroid is contracting a certain amount. They're holding tension on that vocal fold, and the brain is sending those impulses, those nervous system impulses to those muscles at a vibrating frequency or a pulsating frequency of about 5 to 8 times a second, which then manifests itself in those laryngeal muscles. And as Mike just said, what happens is the pitch fluctuates. We get a little bit above and a little bit below, right? We usually get smaller variations when we perceive straight toning, and when we get big variations, we perceive a wobble. But not only are there frequency modulations, there are amplitude modulations as well. And those amplitude modulations can be big or they can be small. That requires that setup for the muscles to be able to do the vibrating, the impulses that we perceive as vibrato. The entire instrument, you need to have it coordinated, and your larynx has to be free. You can't be constricting those neck muscles that we talked about, because if you're tightening up those neck muscles, it's putting artificial forces on the larynx, and it's squeezing down around that cricothyroid muscle, and things are not going to bounce the way that you want them to. If you're shoving too much air at your vocal folds, if you're contracting your abs really hard and you're starting to push, you're putting too much air pressure on the vocal folds, and vibrato is not going to show up in a natural way. If you're singing really, really breathy you're also not bringing the vocal folds together enough for the vibrato to show up. So you got to look for the center zone, the sweet spot. And those messa di voce exercises that we were doing earlier can help. Now, you'll find that there are methods out there where some people say that you're going to do pulse your abdominal wall and try to pulse your muscles to create vibrato. Now, try to do that 8 times a second.
Yes.
Right? It's not realistic. And so that method, it just doesn't work. The science does not back it up. And they talk about that in this book as well. It actually can end up giving you problems. Now, if it's a gimmick to try to teach somebody how to let go, and you say, do that and go, ha, 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 and you're just doing it as a gimmick to get them to free their voice up, that's different. Because then the teacher is doing it knowing that I'm just trying to break you out of your comfort zone. I'm trying to break you out of your default, right? But if you end up using it as a permanent technique, you could run into problems. If you try to do some pulsating of your larynx, feeling like you're trying to move it up and down, could cause problems. And if you're trying to do anything with your jaw to manipulate vibrato, it could cause problems. Now, there are ways to hold a little tension in your jaw to straight tone. There are ways to do certain things with your breath to get a straight tone. Those are advanced techniques and not really what we're talking about, but I want to acknowledge those do exist, okay? So what I would suggest, Steve, is just continue working on balancing your registration, making sure that you have an even and steady breath flow through the vocal folds, which requires you to coordinate that laryngeal action, the registration at the laryngeal level, as well as the respiratory system. And then also play around with vowel shaping, because the research does indicate that there are some impacts of the vowel on vibrato as well. But remember, at the end of the day, it's going to show up when you get everything free and into the automatic stage where it can just easily happen. If you feel like you're really, really stuck and the other things we've talked about today aren't getting you there, what I would do is just do wobbles. To just start, and they're easy exercises going, and then you can bring it down into a smaller interval, and then bring it down to a real small half step, and then see if it'll just start to show up on its own, okay? Those wobbles, they're called velocity exercises, and they're just getting your voice to move so fast that you can't grab on with the wrong muscles. And sometimes that will break things free for you.
Gotcha. So would you agree with this, that if you're a new singer and you just start singing and you naturally have a vibrato, that's kind of showing you that the condition of the balance within your voice, it's already pretty good.
Yeah, you're moving in the right
direction. If you don't have vibrato and you're just starting, it's not a bad thing. It just means you got some work to do, and that as you start to coordinate, get the motor skills that you've been talking about today, as those develop, then the vibrato will come with that, right? It's kind of an indicator of the condition or health of the balance within the muscles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing is don't obsess about it. I have so many people like, I feel like there's something wrong with my vibrato. It's like, no, your vibrato is doing that because other things are getting in the way. Your tongue's retracting, your larynx is pushing up, your larynx is stuck in the middle, and that's why you have a wobble. So if we get that out of the way, you should see your vibrato then start to even itself out.
Yeah.
There are anatomical differences between all of us. There are age-related factors, hormone-related factors, injury-related factors. I have a student right now who's had some bad acid reflux. And one of the things that acid reflux can do is cause nerve damage in those arytenoids. So he has a paresis, which is a temporary paralysis, essentially, right? And so we're spending a lot of time right now trying to get his left vocal fold to close all the way. And so when it doesn't close all the way, it's like a real fast vibrato. And as we've been working on getting it to come together, he can now sing straight tone with a speech-like production without problems. And when he's starting to sing legit now, he's starting to settle into the middle zone of that 5 to 8 cycles per second. But that was a physical impairment that was in the way. And that's why, again, if you're really running into troubles, a professional can really help maybe, cut off some time of your struggles with things.
Absolutely. I'm going to keep going unless you tell me you're out of time. So we got 2 more on the list that we're playing. This one comes from, I feel like might say it wrong. So if I do, I'm so sorry. Dinah Lynn, hope I got it right. Okay. Do you get shy or nervous when it comes to singing in small crowds?
In front of my friends, yes.
Yes. Before we go live, why not?
Yeah, exactly, right. Look, we all did. I'm going to tell you right now. My first time, I remember getting up in college. I was a freshman. I had to sing. It was mortifying. My left knee shook horrifically. It was so obvious. I saw the video. My left knee was shaking, and my right arm or my left arm was kind of shaking, and my head would kind of tilt and do weird things. And I felt horrible. I didn't know what the problem was. I thought I was just no talent, terrible, and never get through it. Then I took an acting class. And what I realized in that acting class is the reason I was shaking on stage is because I was focusing on how I sounded. And when you only focus on how you sound, you're standing there judging it the whole time. You're second guessing what other people think. Your brain starts having a meltdown. It's fight or flight, right? Your body's going, this doesn't feel good. Danger, danger, danger. Go, go, go. It's a primitive instinct that we have that we can't really short circuit. Some people have it worse than others, right? It's there to protect you from bad situations. What I learned in acting classes is that if you focus on telling a story and you are fully 100% immersed in telling that story, your brain can't be focusing on anything else, which means you shouldn't be nervous. And if you catch yourself trying to focus on the story and you're kind of going in and out, that's a normal progression of solving the problem, but it tells you that you need to continue to do the work to focus on the story. So what I would say, Dinah Lynn, is that what I want you to do is really go in and look at how, to communicate in a song, how to bring emotion into a song, how to storytell into a song. Look up acting techniques by people like Chekhov and Stanislavski and Meisner. Take an acting class. Even if you're like, I don't want to be an actor, still go take a class and learn how actors think. Because all actors are storytellers. They're storytellers. Singers are storytellers. The other thing is just to keep getting up and doing it all the time and trying to do the work on your own to figure out how to tell a story. Singing with groups of people can be even better. Get into just a makeshift group of friends who get together and play instruments and take turns singing. Practice will get you through that, right? The first time you put yourself out there, you're going to feel real awkward. The 1,000th time that you put yourself out there, you're going to be like, okay, what key are we doing? That one, got it. And then you sing it and you crack a note. You're like, oh, well, that was today. We'll do it next week, right? Because after 1,000 performances, you're just used to stuff not going right, right? We rarely have perfect performances, right? You have to be doing it for a real long time before you start feeling like, man, that was perfect. That was my dream performance today. There's almost always something that goes wrong. The mic's got a weird crackle in it and it distracts you. And then you notice the guy who's eating weird in the front row and now you can't think. I mean, there are factors outside of our control. But focus on communicating the human experience through the songs that you choose and realize that people are there in that performance because they want to connect with other human beings. And if you are just authentically you and tell your stories, that's all you can do. And in any given room, there are always going to be people who don't like you. And that's okay, right? I do it. And when I teach workshops, I'll ask a question. I'll be like, how many people like Ariana Grande? And you will always see hands that do not go up. And I'll tell everybody to look around the room. Be like, but she's famous. She's got lots of awards. Look how many people don't like her. And I say, how many people love Ariana Grande? Like, she's your fave. Hands fall down. And we have fewer hands. Again, she's famous. She makes a great living, but a lot of you don't love her. How's that possible? Well, it's possible because there's billions of people on this earth. You don't have to make all of them happy. You need to make a fraction of 1% of them happy, right? You just got to connect with the people that you connect with. And we're all different. We all have different personalities, different life stories. Find your audience. And what I would say is that when you find that audience, you're going to feel less scared. You're going to feel less nervous because you'll know that you're walking into that setting to perform for people who are there to share an experience with other people. They're your kind of people. They're your community, and they're going to be receptive to you. And that there's always going to be somebody in the room who's not going to like you. There's nothing you can do about that. And I bet you if you think about performances you've seen, you know that there's performances you've sat through that you didn't like, right? That just makes us human. So you walk onto the stage and go, you know what? Some people aren't going to like me. Still forget about it. They're going to move on. They're not going to think about what they didn't like. They're going to think about what they did like and move on. And that's what you have to do as well. You have to go give your performance. If it doesn't go right, great, fine, forget it. You have to move on. Then you got to try again. And if you keep trying, find your group of people and start learning how to storytell, I think you're going to feel a lot different.
Absolutely. You know, just get a good solid pre-performance or pre-game routine, whatever you want to call it, that you can get into a rhythm. So as you do it, you start to build a little trust and confidence in yourself. Like I do this every time before I go on. It helps calm me and center me, right?
Yep.
And then just imagine everyone in the audience is maybe, in naked, right? So, whatever you got to imagine, but get lost. Most important, get lost in the music and tell the story. And I think that's the biggest thing is just, give everyone something to remember.
Yep.
And I think then he takes it off the worry. So, all right, last question, then I'll look at the chat. This one comes in from another teacher, Norma Jean. Thanks for your question. She writes in, one of my 10-year-old students wants to belt. What should I tell her the experts say?
Good. So when this question came in, it was too long for the software to put on the scroller. So let me just fill in a couple extra details that I think are important. She said it's more of an immature treble voice at 10 years old. Totally makes sense. And that this student really wants to learn to belt to be ready for high school. Again, I get it. It's an emotionally driven desire, and that's very, very common. What I would say is
wait a second. When you say treble voice, we're talking
she said soprano.
Pre-change. Okay.
At the age of 10, more than likely, she's prepubescent. As she goes through puberty, her larynx is actually going to descend 2 vertebrae in her neck, and her vocal folds are going to double in size. So anything that she gets locked into as a sensation before puberty is going to throw everything off on the other side. The best thing that she can do is continue lessons through that change, because then she's less likely to run into issues. There is a belief by some laryngologists, world famous ones like Dr. Sadaloff, that we might be able to create muscle contour changes pre-puberty that could be problematic. And so the idea with that is that if you start bulking up that thyroarytenoid muscle pre-puberty and then the vocal folds elongate, that muscle bulk is still going to be there. And you're going to now be dealing with a really imbalanced system after it's grown longer and everything's just out of whack. So that is a possible concern of pushing somebody too far too soon. At the same token, there have been some studies done with rats where they have vocalized the rats. Yes, it's possible. And then examined the vocal folds of the rats to see if there were muscular changes, because the muscular composition of the rats' vocal folds are similar enough to humans that it's a good model. Right now, we're not seeing any changes. So that idea of muscle contouring is worth keeping in mind, but it's also important to know that we don't have concrete proof that that actually fully happens. With that in mind, my expert opinion is the safest place to start is to get them singing like they speak and having a lot of fun doing it while telling a story. Because if you get those things down, you can tell her that as her voice goes through the change, the belt quality is going to get easier because her vocal folds will be larger and her larynx will be lower, both of which are going to make it easier to do the things that she wants to do. But if she isn't already learning how to tell a story, and then she has to try to add that on at the same time, she will be behind. She could start getting better at acting her songs now, so that as she goes through the change, she carries that with her, because that's not going away. She could learn to get really good with rhythm and pitch, because the pitch is going to get wonky as she goes through her change, but the rhythm's not. The rhythm is a learned experience. And if she starts learning that before she goes through puberty, she'll already have that tool on the other side. If she wants to do music theater, which is what I'm assuming just from your question, and the belt in high school and all of that, I would say too is that learning how to read music before high school is going to give her a leg up. Then when she gets callback materials for the audition the next day, she'll know how to read music. Getting her to be able to play her part on the piano is going to be a big leg up, because again, any song you give her, she'll be able to do. All of those skills are critical skills that a 10-year-old should be learning if they want to have a leg up by the time that they get to high school. Allow her to sing like she speaks, and allow her to belt in whatever way seems to be natural for her age. So it sounds like in what you're saying that she has a softer voice. So if she is out on a playground playing and she's calling across the, the playground to her friend, what does that sound like? That would be my question. And if she goes, Mary, then there's not a whole lot of natural chest in that voice. You're not going to push it very far because it's not there. If you ask her and she goes, Mary, you go, oh, well, that's kind of the natural limit. We don't want to go any further than that. But if she's on a playground calling out to friends, or she's out playing sports and calling out to friends, hiking, whatever she's doing, and she's out in a group of people using her voice in speech with more closure, That's safe. That's what she's already doing. You can take it up to whatever pitch that sounds comfortable, and I wouldn't really push it beyond that. I would just kind of leave it at that. And again, let her know that, yeah, you're right. Right now, you're only belting a G. But when you go through puberty and those vocal folds change, that range is going to expand and your vocal folds will be ready to handle it. And what we want to do then is help coax you through that. And you'll be in a better spot to do it if we're only belting up to the freest note you have, because we always want to develop the voice with freedom and never allow tension to creep in, because if tension creeps in early, the brain's going to memorize tension and it's going to be hard to get rid of. And the final little thing I would say to her is there is some research that suggests that if you have a vocal injury before the age of 18, you're going to be more prone to vocal injuries after the age of 18. And I see this a lot with students that come to Shenandoah. The students at Shenandoah who have never had a vocal injury before graduate 4 years later without a vocal injury. The students that have had a vocal injury in high school will often struggle, not necessarily with recurrences of it, but mental health aspects of it that really just bog them down, right? You can sit there and say, you're singing fine. And they'll say, but I'm so afraid I'm going to get nodules, because that experience was so traumatic in high school that they are so afraid it's going to happen again. They can't just let their voice exist as it is and let go of that trauma. So it's also something important is like, we want to avoid those injuries before 18 for the mental health aspect of it and the possible actual physical health aspect of it. And that will put her in a better spot as well. So the expert says, learn to sing like you speak. Go ahead and experiment with your head voice, because a strong head voice, if you're really extending those vocal folds, developing that head voice is going to make it easier to belt. You got to have a strong cricothyroid muscle and a limber TA muscle and vocal ligament in order to get up to those high notes. Sing like you speak, get the head voice nice and strong, focus on acting, learn how to read music, learn how to play the piano, learn about vocal style, get your rhythm perfect. And then as you go through the change, stick with voice lessons so you're getting guidance as your voice is going wonky on you. And when you get on the other side, know that there may be some residual effects. And young women especially, that muscle in the back, that interarytenoid muscle, will often be weak. And we end up with what they call a posterior glottal chink, which means there's a little hole in the back. And it can add breathiness to their voice. Can't fight it. You can try to force it to close. You're going to do nothing but add in tension. So you also want to let her know that, hey, on the other side, there might be some breathiness. We're going to keep focusing on just singing songs in the comfortable part of your range and slowly expanding it up, and that chink will close. It usually really comes together around the age of 18 or 19. And she may fight and resist, and that's going to be the hard part. And the moms can as well. But you just have to keep reminding her, I want you to belt. I want you to do the things that you want to do. I also want to make sure that after the age of 18, you're still able to do all of those things. So we'll keep exploring. We'll keep pushing to see, pushing the limits, not actually pushing, but we'll keep seeing if that A flat shows up. But if that A flat isn't there, we don't want to just keep yelling it until it shows up. We want to keep doing vocal exercises on the G until the G is so strong that the A flat shows up. Then we'll make the A flat so strong that the A will show up, and then we'll see where it stops. But we got to let the body naturally progress. If you try to force it, that's when problems occur.
Absolutely. You cannot obviate time was the most important, I think, adage that sometimes we forget in singing. Some things take time.
And I want to comment on what Norma Jean just said. She said, voice teachers are like parents. Kids have selective hearing. You're 100% right, because right now we're going through at Shenandoah, it's casting director and agent season, and we're doing a senior showcase. So I have a real famous casting director working with our students, and who would have known that song's too high for you? I never have said that before. I've never expressed that, have I? And then they go, I got it. It's like, so can we maybe do the key that sounds great? And then they go, yeah. And you're like, awesome. I love you, but I'm not lying to you, And so it doesn't matter who you are, Norma Jean. They are going to do exactly what you said. They're going to look at some of the things you say and have selective hearing. So yes, 100%. The more input that you can give your students and get them hearing other things, the better off they're going to be. And they're going to start to realize, oh, everybody's saying the same thing. That might actually be true. And hopefully then they'll, buy into it and be ready to move forward.
Great. Now, I know we've gone way over, but we still have a number of people on, and we have a very active chat today. So thanks everyone for joining. Matt, do you want to take some questions from the chat?
Yeah, we can run through. We'll do yeah.
Okay, so Doug Gardner has one here about mentioning turnover, turning down the voice. How does this activate? How does the singer activate this? Let's see, cut off part of it. Let me. Oh, I got to
There's a couple
read that one. Okay, how does the singer activate this? And since the vocal mechanism is coupled system, what changes at the level of the vocal cords?
So this gets into all kinds of complicated stuff, Doug, and I think this is a great question, and we can definitely go into more of this because there's acoustic factors that are in there as well. I know we have an acoustics expert. We've got to get on the show because I think that a lot of he has researched this through and through. And
Kenneth Bozeman?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but what's happening is that as you go up, so your vocal folds produce harmonics, and your vocal tract then either helps boost those harmonics or attenuates them and cuts them down a little bit. Okay. And so there are resonating frequencies of everyone's vocal tract, and we call them formants. And voice scientists tend to focus on 5 formants. We really spend a lot of time looking at formants 1, 2, and 3, which are really vowel related, but 3, 4, and 5 also get real close to each other. And they're what help produce the ring in a singer's voice. When we're trying to turn over, essentially what we're trying to do is match the timbre of the top of the break to the timbre below the break. So if you don't control anything, we get where the voice starts a little bit more warm.
A little white voice, right?
Yeah, right. It just kind of just goes one timbre, goes up and down. That's great for rock and roll. We're going da 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 da, yeah, and you want to get that electric guitar sound. That's great. But for classical singing or musical theater singing, it's based in acoustic traditions, golden age musicals. You usually want to match the top to the bottom. And what happens is as we're singing, those harmonics that are coming from the vocal folds themselves will start to surpass the location of the formant. And when it does, we get these weird shifts and turns. And that's what makes us either not turn over and go into yelp timbre, or what helps us warm up where we shift the formant to line up with a lower harmonic, which boosts that and keeps the warmth. So essentially what we're trying to do is just use elongating the vocal tract, which can happen by maintaining a neutral to lower laryngeal position, and lip rounding and lip forwarding to elongate the vocal tract as we go up, which then helps bring down the amplitude of some of those higher harmonics while boosting the amplitude of some of the mid frequencies that give us that classical sound. At the same token, there are changes that are happening at the vocal fold level. Now, it's important to understand that there are all kinds of different tonal goals, and this has been written about extensively by Richard Miller in the National Schools of Singing. It's not like there's some unified, universal agreement on what to do with this. Some people may want to go up and still put a lot of oomph behind a note. Let's see if I can turn this down. I don't want to blow this out. But some people want a real heavy sound. And they get that real strong vocal fold closure and that real dark sound. And that's what they want. It's more of a Germanic quality. Other people want it to have a little bit lighter of a sound. The difference between those two is a laryngeal switch. And the first one, I carried more chest register up into that high note. On the second one, I carried less. On both, I made a vowel modification to round those formants and bring them down. So I'll show that vowel modification just by itself. We'll go up in more of a belt timbre. Yeah. So when I all of a sudden rounded off those lips, elongated the vocal tract, you heard it went from having that bright brassy to starting to soften up, right? And then as we came down, we maintained some of that softness. So in a nutshell, that's what's happening. There are so many nuances to this that, again, when we get our acoustics expert on, we'll probably spend the entire show just kind of talking about some of the resonance shifts that happen in this. I'm not a classical singing specialist, even though all 3 of my degrees are in classical singing. I still sing.
Crossed over.
I've crossed over to the dark side and not gone back. So I look at it from the point of view that there are a lot of sounds that get hired, and there are a lot of approaches that work. The singer needs to decide which one they like, and then they need to find the teacher that can help them make those sounds and get the results they're looking for, and that there are a lot of valid ways to do that.
Got it. Can you check your camera, Matt? You went a little out of focus there, and then turn your mic back up. Great demos all day today, by the way. Okay, we've got a couple more in here. This one's by Aryan Sharp.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it.
Is it bad to use your nasal register or nose voice? Is it harmful? Does it generally just sound bad? I often end up automatically switching into nose voice when trying to sing higher notes or fitting into a choir.
Okay, so what we're talking about, first of all, nasality is not always nasality. Your nose is a terrible resonator. So let's take a look at it. That's the nasal cavity. See all those curves? That's flesh. It's bumps of flesh. It's not a straight tube. If sound comes up from your throat and hits into here, it gets deadened off. It doesn't sound good. If we're really nasal, it's and I'm talking in my voice. This is what nasality actually sounds like.
It also, you can't really adjust it. You can't really change the size or shape of that resonator.
Stuck if you're there. So that is literally a soft palate. Now, you can have your soft palate all the way up. And if you pinch your nose shut, you'll know it's up because nothing comes out of your nose. And I can still then make something that people think is nasally. Barely anything's changing, which tells us that that sound is not necessarily nasal sound that's happening. It's happening somewhere else inside the vocal tract. And the research indicates it's happening right here in what's called the aryepiglottic sphincter, the space between the arytenoids and the epiglottis. As you narrow that down, it boosts some of those frequencies and creates what we oftentimes consider to be nasality. But the term that voice scientists are using more and more is twang. Twang has that sound of like a steel guitar, that hey, that's not me singing in my nose. Hey, that's me allowing that aryepiglottic sphincter to narrow and a little bit of laryngeal rise, because when your larynx rises a little bit, it can also contribute to those sensations of nasality. So for a long time, people thought that all classical singers lifted their soft palate to seal off the nasal cavity when singing. That's been proven false. There's a world famous voice scientist named Johan Sundberg, and in his research laboratory in Sweden, many years, I think it's 20, 30 years ago, they started plugging people's noses with cotton balls, or they put a light inside of somebody's nose and try to shine light down in the back and see if you can see it or not. And what they discovered is not every singer had their soft palate all the way up. There was some opening. Now we have researcher named Brian Gill, Dr. Brian Gill at Indiana University, who's calling it VPO, veilopharyngeal port opening. And what he's finding is, again, in elite singers, there is oftentimes VPO, meaning that there is some opening of the soft palate, nasopharynx. Well, what we're starting to learn from computer models and some other vocal tract models that they're making, especially over in Asia, is it appears that if you allow some sound to go up and escape into that nasal cavity, a little bit of VPO, it actually reduces pressure on the vocal folds and it can make it easier to mix. So what it sounds like to me is that you've discovered that on your own, that when you use a little bit of nasality, it's easier for your vocal folds to get into a mixed configuration. Now, that's a motor skill that you're figuring out with a tool right now. Eventually, what you're going to want to do is see if you can start to lift that palate a little bit, or open up that aryepiglottic sphincter a little bit, or drop your larynx a little bit and maintain your mixed registration. Because ideally, you never want to be stuck in a singular sound, but rather you want to have the ability to explore a wide range of sounds. So no, not 100% bad. Sounds like you stumbled upon a coping strategy to deal with the situation that you're in right now. And it legitimately probably is helping you feel like you're mixing easier. But in the long term, you will want to try to do some exercises to start figuring out how to progress from that place. And you'll find all kinds of new qualities that you can explore.
Awesome. This next one's real quick, easy one. If you could, what resources do you have for these models, the larynx, the vocal mechanism? Can you share, will you divulge where you got your beautiful models from, or can we drop a link?
Yeah, I'll have to go back. I just grabbed a whole link, but yes, I can put it back on the shows. I grabbed the links for a bunch of them. Several of them are on Amazon. One is on another company website. I'm going to tell you, they're not cheap. This model is $500-$600, right? The body that I have, if you've ever seen, I usually have a full body back there where the parts come out. That was $700, if I remember right. I think this head was $120. You can get a smaller head, which I do have as well. That's just as good for teaching as $39.99, $49.99. But yeah, we can go back and then drop those links in it. I think this skull was maybe $50. The ear that I have was around 30, 40. So it's an investment. I use them so much to teach and do the videos that it was worth it. But what I would say is you can also get on, if you have a tablet, there's some great anatomy apps like Anatomy Atlas. And with that app, it has an augmented reality feature that if you have a table in your teaching space, you point your iPad or whatever tablet you use at the table and put a spot to park the model, and it will put an entire skeleton there. And then your student can hold the iPad and just walk around the table, and they can see the skeleton from every point of view. You can strip away everything down to the larynx and set it in the middle of the table and walk around the larynx and see what it does. You can strip away muscles, cartilages, bones, all on this app. I picked it up when it was on a flash sale of some type. I think it's maybe $29.99. But I mean, I use it so much that it's totally worth the cost of that. You can also, if you're looking for posters or other like just visual items that you can use, go and check out Blue Tree Publishing. They're good friends of us over here. They did a real solid deal and enabled us to use a lot of their illustrations and animations in our online courses. Love them. They're great people. And they have apps as well as print materials that you can pick up. And the print poster that does show a lot of this anatomy, I think it's $30. So definitely cheaper than buying the actual model.
Great. Blue Tree. Okay, cool. So then let's see. Was there one? I thought there was one more. So many. Okay, we got the name of the book. That's good. Thanks, Laura, for dropping that in. I think that might be it, guys. Sorry if I missed your question, but I think we got them all. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We're going to be blasting out those emails every week. So if you do have questions, you can click on the link. The link's not going to change, but we will send it out. If you didn't get your question answered today, just drop it in here or go to our website, sign up, get on the mailing list, ask us your question. We literally only got through a fraction of the questions today. We had enough questions the last many shows, but we'll keep taking them because a lot of the questions, some of them duplicate. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
And we have a special guest next week, Edry Means Weekly. We've been wanting to get on the show for a long time. He's going to be here to talk about.
Oh, Edry, yes, great.
So I'm super excited for that. We have Melissa Foster coming on in a couple weeks. A pop rock specialist, someone who also does hip hop and rap as well. So I'm excited to have a talk with her. We'll be doing more of these Q&As for sure as well. But thanks everybody for tuning in. Like Mike said, please keep the questions coming in. We really want to get this information out and help people. And if this vocal anatomy is all new to you, we do have a new course that's still on our special launch. I don't know if Mike, if you can pop up the web address there. There you go. The course is called How the Voice Works. And we put this together. It's a 4-hour course. We filmed it in Hollywood, in a Hollywood studio. It's beautiful. It's filmed in 4K. And I use all these anatomical models. It's broken down into lessons within each module so you can go in and learn about these things. It's got a lot of good information in it. I tried to condense the information to what I think are the most important concepts for singers. There are things we can get into like innervations, which nerve goes into which muscle, but that doesn't necessarily make you a better singer. So what I try to do in this course is really consolidate and focus in like, here are the vocal fold muscles you should be aware of. Here's the motor learning you should be aware of. If you at least can memorize this base level of knowledge, it should really help you accelerate your progress. And in that course, there are also MRI videos. So like with the question that we had about nasality and the soft palate, I have videos that show you what happens when the soft palate's up, what happens when the soft palate's down, what happens with the soft palate somewhere in the middle. You can go in and you can watch and start to actually build a better mental map, build your own x-ray vision of what's actually happening inside your voice. We have great links to video stroboscopies where you're going to be able to watch the vocal folds and actually see that break happen. There's a great video that shows you at the moment that the voice transitions from chest into head. Another great learning tool that you're going to be able to do. And then we have some guided listening. And in the guided listening, you're going to be able to watch me take 10 performers that you know, and I'm going to go through and say, here's more chest. Now they're transitioning into head. Here they're doing this with their vowel. Now they're singing softer than you think. I've got an example in there of Ariana Grande on a microphone and off a microphone. So we can talk about all the processing that happens. Lots of resources. There's a 100-page workbook that goes with it with additional resources for you to do your own deep dive. And if you don't have a voice teacher yet, and you are trying to do something on your own, or you're in the middle of COVID and you're like, I can't afford voice lessons right now. I've been in your shoes before many, many times. And because of that, Mike asked me, hey, could you put together a vocal exercise kit to help the singers who are stuck right now? And I said, sure. So I wrote a 20-page workbook, and we have about 150 exercise combinations that you can work through on your own. We have low and high range for both, biological male, biological female, testosterone dominant, estrogen dominant vocal folds. So you should be able to find pitches that work. And I tell you, to pause it if you want to go higher, cut out if you need to go lower. But for those of you who just feel really stuck and you're really desperate for something to do, it's all in there in that pack with you together. And then we're also going to give you access to some of the past Q&As that we've taken offline. There's about 30 hours of content. And this kit, I know that's a lot of stuff. Every time I go through this list, it's like, wow, this is packed full of so much. Every teacher we've told about this thing, they say, so what is this, like a $500 course? I can't charge people that in the middle of COVID. I know Mike would love to kill me for that. But Mike and I have talked about it, and Mike wants to help singers too, because that's the whole purpose of voicelessons.com. It's $47. Right now, the special launch price for 4 hours, the 100-page workbook, the 20-page vocal warm-up workbook with 150 exercise variations, the 30 hours of Q&A content, the guided listening content, the MRI videos, the stroboscopy videos, $47. We want to change some people's lives, help them out if they're stuck in the middle of COVID and they're looking for something that they can do to accelerate their progress, even though they can't do their traditional training. I think this is going to help. I think it'll give you a lot of good material to work with. And there's a follow-up course that we're going to be releasing in March called Singing with Style. And some of those acting things we talked about, I'm going to start to spill some of the secrets on that, some of the secrets on how to really listen to your favorite artists and start to learn how to think about what they're doing. Basically, we're going to show you how to learn how to think like people like Christina Aguilera and Alicia Keys and all the other artists that also have master classes and tell you what they're doing, but don't tell you how. We're going to tell you how to actually do the thing that they instinctually have learned over the years. So stay tuned for that. We're excited to release that. How long is the offer going to last, Mike?
I think when the next course comes out, March 1st, I think things are going to change. So it's not going to be too much longer. And, it's funny. I forgot to tell you this, Matt, but we actually had a couple of teachers that have bought it and are now using it. They're buying it for their students because they're repeating some of the same stuff over and over. And we just put it in such a good package. So we're actually cooking up some teacher studio deals on that.
And there's also colleges and high school choirs that are using this to help enhance the teaching during COVID. So if you are, teaching a high school choir, a college choir, or any kind of group class, and you're like, man, I could really use some resources, go ahead and reach out. Mike's team can take you through our different packages. It's a really good deal. Again, we just want to help. We know people are in a bind. We know people are hurting. The prices for groups are unbelievable. So if you need help right now, come check it out. We're here to help you out.
Awesome. Well, hey, everyone, have a great week. We'll take, guess we got a couple of interviews coming up. So next time we're going to get the questions again. It's going to be in March. But, hey, we'll take your questions. We love them all. And have a great week, everyone. See ya.